Today we're going to be entertained by Mick Bister. Like most boys in the 1940s, Mick enjoyed train spotting, stamp collecting and Meccano building, till, like a lot of us, he was lured away in his teenage years by rugby, cycling and the opposite sex. In June '62, however, all this would change. During his studies in France, he ventured into the main post office at Tours to avail himself of stamps to frank his letters home. To his wonderment, a large glass cabinet adjacent to the counter displayed the stamps that were available, all exquisitely line engraved and proudly depicting France's culture, heritage and achievements. And not one with a face value of more than 50 cents, which in those days was about a shilling. He was hooked again and returned home having purchased the entire issues of 1962 and having become a committed Francophile. After completing his studies, Mick joined his first philatelic society, the Leamington and Warwick Philatelic Society, where he met David Lamb, who was a highly respected member of the France and Colonies Philatelic Society and the Andorra Philatelic Study Circle. He became Mick's mentor and advised him on how to specialise. Thus began Mick's engagement with the Marianne stamps of France, and in particular the Marianne de Muller issues. Mick joined the France and Colonies Society in 1969, which led to the development of other collecting areas, including the 5-set type blanc, the 50-cent Leonard Slur, and the 1 franc 50 Pétain stamp, and of course the 50-cent Joan d'Arc. All of which is exhibited at national level, including the state visit and postal mechanisation, and also at international level. He also a member of the France and Colonies Society in the USA and the Collectors Club of New York. He served on the committee of the France and Colonies Society for 30 years and has twice held the position of president. And after a period of journal manager, he's still heavily involved in the editorial team. His main contribution to the Society has been his regular authorship of in-depth articles on a broad range of topics, totaling over 120 titles over a period of more than 50 years. His present study of the Marianne de Muller issue in 10 parts is nearing completion. And after receiving 2 gold medals at national level for his entry on the postcode programmes of France during the experimental years, sounds good, Mick was invited in 2014 to become a member of the Royal. He was subsequently asked to give a display on his exhibited topic, which was presented in 2015, after which he was awarded a fellowship. And I've seen this doing the rehearsal, and you're all going to be treated to some wonderful material. So Mick, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my display this afternoon. In front of you at the title page with just a brief summary of how I'm going to divide up the presentation into the 4 sections, and on the right hand side the stamping in question. We'll start though by putting the stamp into context. So let's have a look at the map of 1429 of France, and we'll see what a parlous state France was in after the Battle of Agincourt in 1415 and the Treaty of Troyes in 1420. The Treaty of Troyes was an agreement that King Henry V of England and his heirs would inherit the French throne upon the death of King Charles VI of France. The treaty was compromised, though, 2 years later with the deaths of both Henry V of England and Charles VI of France, leaving 2 claimants to the empty French throne, Henry VI, the boy 9 months old, and Charles the Dauphin, the son of Charles VI, but disinherited by the treaty. To support their claim to the French crown and territory, the English pressed on with further military campaigns. The map, as I said, shows the situation in 1429. France was divided between the areas ruled by the English, shown in pink, and the areas ruled by the French monarchy, shown in green. The Duchy of Burgundy, shown in orange, was an ally of the English. There was a small pocket in the northeast of France that was still loyal to the French throne, but suffered frequent incursions by the English. This was the part of the province of Lorraine, and in the top inset you can see marked the town of Domremy, where Joan of Arc was born. If we go to the bottom inset, we see an even more complicated scenario. On the edge of French territory is the independent enclave of Orange, which later, through marriage arrangements, became part of the Dutch Nassau-Orange dynasty, which ultimately gave us our King William of Orange. Adjoining Orange is the papal state of Avignon, shown in pale blue, where 7 popes in succession resided in the 14th century. Its neighbour was the region of Provence, shown in lilac, ruled at the time by the King of Naples. For the purpose of this presentation, the most important inset is the middle one, which shows the border along the River Loire, where the English were attempting to cross the river to reach deeper into French-held territory. Their last obstacle was the city of Orléans, which they had laid siege to in 1428, and is represented in the top right of the inset by a small area of green surrounded by pink. Bottom left in the inset is the town of Chinon, where the Dauphin, the future King Charles VII, was in residence. When and where then does Joan of Arc come into the story? Well, in March 1429, this young peasant girl, Joan of Arc, arrived in Chinon on her divinely ordained mission to defeat the English, to rescue the Dauphin, Charles, and to deliver him to his coronation at Reims. Her faith, her steadfast courage, and her tenacity convinced the cynical Dauphin of her divine powers, and she was entrusted with her companions in arms to join the French army at Orléans. As they say, the rest is history. Joan successfully galvanized the French army, and with the crushing defeat of the English, the siege of Orléans was lifted on the 8th of May 1429 and marked the turning point of the 100 Years' War. In July 1429, Reims was liberated and the Dauphin was crowned Charles VII, King of France. Joan of Arc inspired much courage among the French, and she quickly became a symbol of national pride, which has endured to this very day. Félix Dupanloup, a Bishop of Orléans from 1849 to 1878, led efforts to promote Joan of Arc's beatification and ultimately her canonization. Support came not just from the Church. In 1892, a certain Monsieur Brison proposed a stamp design in blue seen on the left, in the same colour and with the same value as the contemporary 15-centime Peace and Commerce issue for the letter rate. In 1894 and 1895, tastefully designed postal stationery was issued to further publicise the cause. Surprisingly, the envelope was printed with the 5 centimes Peace and Commerce, which limited it to the printed matter rate. The 2 letter cards, of which 2,000 of each were issued, were available either with the printed 15-centime Peace and Commerce issue shown top right, or with an attached adhesive as shown below. On 8th of May 1429, after the Relief of Orléans, Joan led a spontaneous procession around the city of Orléans to thank God for the departure of the English. Since 1430, Orléans has since been celebrating her victory with an annual festival known as the Fêtes de Jeanne, during which Joan of Arc's victory procession around the city is re-enacted. Nowadays, it's a full-scale production, lasting several days and comprising the procession, a service in the cathedral, traditional and regional music and dancing, medieval games, and lots of eating and drinking. During the French Revolution, they were temporarily suspended with the suppression of the church, and also during the 2 World Wars. The festival was cancelled in 2020, but respecting the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, a production on a smaller scale was performed in 2021. Commemorative souvenirs such as medallions and vignettes became widely available at the festivities in Orléans in the second half of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th. Denis Fouattier's equestrian statue of Joan of Arc, located in the Place du Martroi in Orléans, frequently features on both medallions and vignettes. Marcel Marron was a prolific producer of vignettes and postcards in Orléans, and we shall see later his involvement in the 1929 stamp issue. His printing works and bookshop were located appropriately in the Rue Jeanne d'Arc in Orléans, a few yards from the cathedral, and here we see his business card top left. His surname, Marron, means chestnut, and he devised a logo comprising a chestnut leaf and the letter M for his first name, Marcel. In 1909, Joan of Arc was beatified in Notre Dame Cathedral by Pope Pius X, and Marcel Marron issued two sets of commemorative vignettes, one on the left illustrating quotations by Joan of Arc, and the other, on the right, illustrating the statue of Joan sculpted by Charles Devaigne to celebrate the beatification and erected in the church of Saint-Paterne in Orléans. Also in 1909, Marcel Marron produced a set of 3 vignettes depicting Joan's arrival in Orléans and inscribed Gloire à la Grande Française. They could be attached to mail as vignettes in their own right, or used as porte-timbre, as shown here, cancelled in Orléans and Paris. In 1912, to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Joan's birth, Marcel Marron printed scores of different postcards to be sold during the Fêtes de Jeanne. The following year, he reproduced the same photographs in his 1913 vignettes, and here we have 2 pairings of the 1912 cards and the 1913 vignettes with identical images. Note his logo is featured in the bottom right-hand corner of both. In 1912, he also produced vignettes which served a dual purpose. Initially issued to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Joan's birth and inscribed as such, they were later overprinted 7th and 8th of May and issued to celebrate the annual Fêtes de Jeanne later in the year. On the left we see 2 versions in different shades of brown, an example of an offset on the gum side and used on a postcard with the date applied in manuscript. On the right are other examples of the vignette used on covers. Joan's beatification in 1909, the 500th anniversary of her birth in 1912, and ultimately her canonization in 1920 had all been ignored by the postal authorities, no doubt due to the 1905 French law on the separation of the church and state, which did not permit religious imagery on stamps. However, in September 1928, Théophile Chollet, mayor of Orléans, persuaded the PTT to issue a stamp to commemorate the 500th anniversary of the Relief of Orléans. On this occasion, the PTT agreed to its issue as a recognition of a historical event and not a religious one. Artists were invited to submit their designs, accompanied by a stamp-size photographic reproduction. The competition was launched on the 10th of December 1928 and results were announced on the 8th of December. Of the designs submitted, the shortlisted contenders were as follows. On the left, Fernand Bivel depicts Joan of Arc waving her standard victoriously, and Verrec depicts Joan standing on the battlements of Orléans. Both these artists were runners-up. On the right, Abel Mignon, depicting Joan and her standard, shared joint 4th place with Marcel Marron, whose entry we shall see later. However, note that Abel Mignon's incorrect dates of 1428 to 1928. Bottom right, we see a design depicting Jeanne on horseback by Henri Scheffer, who was awarded second prize. Marcel Marron produced a large number of potential entries, and the bulk of his artwork is in the collection of fellow collector Jean-Paul Fournier. His designs were exquisitely drawn, and on the left you can see 5 of them. The design he chose to submit, centre bottom, put him in joint 4th place with Abel Mignon. To the right are so-called colour proofs, which he printed later in limited quantities in his bookshop and sold from his shop. Georges Dumoulin was awarded 3rd prize. He was the son of Louis Dumoulin, who was at the time the director of the State Printing Works in Paris. Georges Dumoulin sadly died shortly after the awards were announced. As a tribute, Georges Ourier, one of the Printing Works' resident engravers, engraved the design in a form of a collective colour proof, which he presented to Louis Dumoulin in memory of his late son. According to a lot description from a recent Paris auction, only 3 copies of this item are known, but I have seen several more in addition to mine. The first prize was awarded to Gabriel Balong, whose design shown here on the left may well have been inspired by Jean-Jacques Chérès's painting seen in the centre, and which had inspired one of Marcel Marron's essays also. An effective element of the design, which you can see on the left, is the way in which Joan of Arc appears to be riding out of the frame of the picture. She has a high forehead and a high hairline, and the fleurs-de-lis on her banner are prominent. But things will change. Images were released to the press in December, and we see on the right a colorized version on the front cover of Le Pèlerin, a Catholic journal, published on the 6th of January 1929. The release was, however, a little premature. The task of engraving the stamp was given to Abel Mignon, who had been one of the runners-up in the competition. However, before proceeding with the printing, Louis Dumoulin, the director of the State Printing Works, and Abel Mignon, the engraver, was summoned before the Under-Secretary of State for the PTT. Modifications had already been made to the design, as shown in the artwork on the left, particularly to her face and hair. She now has a fringe. But in order to appease the vocal anti-monarchist lobby, the engraver was instructed to render the royalist fleur-de-lis on Joan of Arc's standard less prominent, and to add the word France to the upper frame of the stamp alongside the word poste. The modifications can be seen in the artwork on the right. However, further manuscript instructions on the left of the artwork stipulate that the height of the stamp, including the names of the designer and engraver, should be reduced to 21.5 millimeters. The work was signed off by Abel Mignon on the 7th of January 1929. The die-proof top left was printed on chalky paper, but ordinary paper was used for the production of the colour trials. These colour trials were pulled privately by Abel Mignon and not by the PTT. The 50-centime lined sewer, which the 50-centime Jeanne d'Arc was to temporarily replace, was printed in red, the colour adopted since 1906 for all stamps serving the internal letter rate. The jury had recommended, however, that the Jeanne d'Arc stamp be printed in royal blue, as shown in the proof on the left, as it was of the opinion that it was the appropriate colour in which the Maid of Orléans should be attired. Royal blue was a kick in the eye for the anti-monarchist lobby. But even this victory was short-lived, as the issued colour shown on the right was much darker and much closer to Abel Mignon's choice of blue seen on the previous slide. Production of the printing electrodes began early February 1929, and printing commenced on the 14th of February and continued to the 11th of June. Dated corner blocks of the first and last printings are shown on the left. Shades of ink varied, but the black in the image in the centre of the screen is believed to have been caused by the leakage of black ink from the reservoir that was feeding the data on the press. Below is an example of private advertising applied by Ville-Aiglon to the gutter margin of the sheets. On the right, we see a comparison between a proof pulled from the original die on the left and the actual stamp on the right. Firstly, you will see at the bottom the outcome of the instruction to reduce the height of the design by 0.5 millimeter. The two signatures have been pushed upwards by the required distance, but the bottom frame has had to be reduced to accommodate them. Furthermore, there has been a considerable loss of definition, particularly in the areas around the saddle's pommel and the saddle cloth. Abel Mignon was criticised for his heavy-handed workmanship, but part of the problem was down to the number of stages in the production process itself, which took its toll on the finesse of the design. You can see there the stages of production. From the original die, a secondary die would be copied. From the secondary die, 50 lead copies would be taken. These were then bounded up together and electroplated into the master plate. The master plate then was copied, from which 4 service plates were made. These 4 service plates were then curved and screwed onto the cylinder of the Chambon rotary press. There was further adjusting to be done, and finally the printing plates were polished. Printing of 2 sheets of 1/100th per revolution then took place. So it is inevitable that during those series of stages that there will be some loss of definition. There was no official first day of issue announced, although the words month of March, mois de mars, are written at the bottom of an internal PTT memo stating that the Jeanne d'Arc stamp would replace the 50 centime Soa for a period of 6 months. The earliest date recorded is the 2nd of March 1929, found on mail from Orléans together with the special slogan postmark, from Paris and from Reims, where the coronation of Charles VII took place. Unfortunately, the mayor of Orléans, Théophile Chollet, who had championed the stamp, died on the 23rd of April. He saw his stamp issued, but did not live to enjoy the Fêtes de Jeanne held in May. A street was later named after him. The production of booklets commenced in March 1929. The first printings were off flat plate presses. Such printings can be identified by the centre margin, which equals the width of half a stamp, and the panes are stapled to the cover. In cases where the sheets have not been guillotined accurately, the printing data may still be visible. Here, B20330 represents respectively the press operator's ID, B, the date of printing, the 2nd of March, and the press number 30. Advertising space was available in the margins. And here we see on this booklet at the top promotions by Phosphatine Falière, health food, Benedictin toothpaste, La Vache qui rit, cheese, and by the wine industry. The booklet covers were printed by Carlos Courmont who was also responsible for obtaining the advertising contracts for the stamp margins and for the covers. And he delivered the covers to the PTT for the final assembly of the booklets. Booklets for national distribution display the standard serial number in the top left-hand corner on the spine of the cover, which you see bottom left. Here we see an enlargement of series 165 on the booklet spine and on the booklet cover for series 166. The current postal rates were printed inside the cover. Booklets for regional distribution and sale were identified by the initials of the region to which they were allocated. The initials were printed to the right of the serial number as shown in the top pair, SP for Sud-Pyrénées and SA for Sud-Alpes. The bottom cover bears simultaneously the initials of two regions. The front cover bears the letter O for West, and the back cover is printed with the letters RP for Région Parisienne. Their existence could be due to an oversight by the printer, or maybe it was a deliberate means of satisfying two contracts simultaneously. Booklets for distribution and sale in specific départements were not allocated a serial number, but were printed with the name of the target département. For example, Doubs, top left. Likewise, booklets for distribution and sale in specific towns were issued without a serial number, but with the name of the town in its place. For example, Vichy, shown top right, and Rouen, shown bottom left, on a cover depicting Joan of Arc's martyrdom. In these categories, the advertising was often specific to the locality. Other towns associated with Joan of Arc, for example, Reims, where Joan attended the coronation of Charles VII in the cathedral, promoted themselves on booklets, but for national distribution. There was a considerable outcry in Orléans against the irreverent juxtaposition of publicity for la vache qui rit, laughing cow, cheese, below the image of their saint. Demands for the booklet's withdrawal were sent to the Under-Secretary of State for the PTT, and a copy of the reply dated the 3rd of May 1929 from the MP for the Loiret is shown on the left. It states that necessary measures will be taken to withdraw the offending advertising. The booklet was not withdrawn, but the PTT issued a circular on the 10th of May and repeated on the 7th of July, shown bottom right, instructing post offices to remove the offending advertising from the booklets before sale. It appears that some booklets were left intact and discreetly redistributed at a later date in Paris and possibly elsewhere in France in order to fulfill the contract with the advertisers. On the right, we see a later usage in October 1932 of the 50 centimes Jeanne d'Arc on mail from Paris to Le Havre, with the offending advertising still attached. The Histoire de la chemise, History of the Shirt series, was a monopoly printing commissioned by the Toile d'Avion fabric manufacturer, containing 8 pages of adverts and price lists, 2 fabric samples, one plain and one coloured, and 4 pages of illustrated text relating the history of shirt design. The stamp margins, however, bought advertising for other companies. The booklet cover seen at the bottom was designed by Joseph Aymar. On the front cover of 4 out of 6 booklets, the roof of the porch is printed in red, as shown on the left, whereas on the other 2 booklets it is printed in black, as shown on the right. Taking into consideration the different fabric combinations, the marginal publicity, and the 2 booklet covers, there are 24 permutations of this one booklet. A number of flat plate booklets were printed to special order and in limited quantities, the so-called private printings. The advertising on both the covers and the sheet margins were devoted entirely to promoting the product of the client, who could then use the booklets to frank his own mail or to pass them on to his customers. Such booklets had to be collected in person from the post office in the town, printed on the spine of the cover. The cover of the Luxe Radio booklet is regarded as one of the finest examples of Art Deco design, produced by the Carlos advertising agency. 3,000 copies were delivered to Lourdes for collection. Philatelic author and dealer André Soignet ordered only 1,000 copies of his two booklets, which were delivered to Provins. The stamps were used to frank mail to his customers. A number of souvenir booklets were commissioned for sale at the International Philatelic Exhibition at Le Havre. The official printing is quoted as 2,000, but it could have been higher. An order of 5,000 copies was placed by Floraven, a manufacturer of health food products in Bordeaux. Each customer purchasing 10 kilos of the company's food products received one booklet free of charge for use on their personal mail. Two companies in Nancy, Busson, a producer of mineral water, and the Champignol Brewery, both ordered 5,000 copies. Note one of the properties of Busson mineral water indicated by the red circle. The result of the local water passing through radium-bearing soil or rock. On the left, we see a printed envelope with a stamp from the Catalogue Gallia booklet, commissioned by the philatelic author André Soignet in Provins. In the middle is a cover bearing a stamp from one of the souvenirs booklets put on sale at the International Philatelic Exhibition at Le Havre, accompanied by an exhibition vignette. On the right, we see 3 examples of the stamp from the Floraven booklet used to pay the £1.50 foreign letter rate on correspondence from Bordeaux to Geneva. The 50c Jeanne booklet was also printed on rotary presses. They have a wider gutter margin, the width of one stamp, and the panes are glued to the inside of the cover instead of being stapled. In addition, 1 in 4 booklets displays the sheet number on the left-hand pane. Also shown is an imperforate copy of the rotary printing. Bicoloured covers were introduced, seen on the left, and a very small quantity of Series 167 was mounted in an experimental cover design, seen far right, in which the normal border of lozenges was replaced by a sawtooth pattern, and the heading was printed in Art Deco typeface. We'll now look at examples of postal usage with the stamp used alone and in increasing multiples. From 1929 to 1937, the PTT promoted its internal airmail service by waiving the 35 centime fee on selected items of mail, as seen on the left. The maximum amount of airmail permitted on any flight was 10 kilograms, but if the full capacity was not achieved with the fee-paying mail, the difference was made up by upgrading normal surface mail, and the cachet lettres transportées exceptionnellement par avion was applied to publicise the concession. On the right is an example of the concessionary postcard rate to Luxembourg. Mail to Luxembourg was initially charged at the full UPU rate, but from May 1910 it was included in France's internal rates. Then, on the 1st of June 1928, a new concessionary rate of 50 centimes was introduced, which lasted until August 1938. 3 copies of the stamp pay the £1.50 French North Africa airmail letter rate, comprising 50 centimes for postage and £1 for the airmail fee. And on the right, £1.50 foreign letter rate. This letter was franked with the intention of it being posted in France, but instead it was posted in Switzerland, at which a pair of 10 centime William Tell booklet stamps were added to pay the internal letter rate, and both the French and Swiss stamps were cancelled with a Swiss TPO CDS. In the 1920s, a race began between Germany, France, and eventually the United States to develop a method of flying mail from ships at sea, allowing it to be transferred to land far ahead of the ship's arrival. In 1929, Dr. Lytle Adams devised a means to deliver and pick up mail from a ship using a light aircraft. The principle was a hook dangled from the plane, which would engage in a large hoop held by steel tubing on the deck of the SS Leviathan, excuse me, and to which was attached the bag of outgoing mail. A platform and canvas trap were also assembled to catch the dropped incoming mail. The Leviathan left Cherbourg for New York on the 2nd of June, with a scheduled pickup on the 6th or 7th. Attempts to pick up mail were made on both days, but failed due to adverse weather conditions. Mail prepared was later returned to senders marked delivery and pickup postponed in manuscript. On the 12th of June, the SS Leviathan was outbound for Europe, and so another attempt was made 60 miles offshore. The pilot was able to drop a bag of mail into the pickup frame, but the collection was far from easy. Only after 13 attempts did he succeed in picking up the mail bag and reeling it into the plane. The plane then returned to Keyport Airfield in New Jersey. From there, the letter shown was forwarded via Newark to New York, where it reached its destination the following day. Again, 3 stamps pay the £1.50 basic pneumatic post rate in Paris, and 4 stamps the £2 second step pneumatic post rate. The visiting card at the bottom is special in so much that it has been cancelled with a complimentary CDS of the Place Jeanne d'Arc office in Paris, and also bears on the back a label promoting a new service by which a telegram message could be conveyed to the recipient by telephone. On the left, 4 stamps pay part of the £5 Foreign Express Letter European Airmail First Band rate to London. On the right, 6 stamps pay the £3 Foreign Registered Letter rate to Buenos Aires. Again, 6 stamps which pay the £3 Foreign Airmail Letter European Third Band rate to Oslo, and on the right, 11 stamps pay the £5.50 Foreign Registered Airmail Letter European Fourth Band to Finland. On the left, 9 booklet stamps pay the £4.50 Franco-colonial registered airmail rate for French Equatorial Africa. The cover was flown on the first flight to establish a direct service from France to Réunion via French Equatorial Africa and Madagascar. The plane took off on the 17th of October, called in at Bangui on the 23rd of October, where this letter was dropped off, and the plane continued and arrived in Réunion 10 days later. On the right, we have an example of crash mail, on which the booklet paying of 10 stamps contributes to the £11.50 all-up registered test flight charge. On the 14th of December 1929, a Newport Delage 641 took off from Algiers on its third leg from Paris to Hanoi. Contact was lost over Tunisia, and it was not until the 23rd of December that its wreckage and the bodies of the crew were discovered on a beach east of Tripoli. This cover was part of the salvage mail. It was returned to Marseille, where it arrived on the 3rd of January 1930 and received a courrier accidenté crash mail cachet. It was dispatched again to Indochina, where it arrived at Saigon on the 29th of January, and from where, unclaimed, it was returned to the sender. This is another example of the late usage excuse me, of the offending La Vache qui rit, laughing cow cheese booklet. The foreign small packet service was created on the 1st of July 1930, prior to which such items had to go at the letter rate. The 16 booklet stamps on this item are paying the sixth step, 450 to 500 grams, foreign registered small packet rate to London, but it has been overfranked by 50 centimes. Finally, a letter to Buenos Aires with 41 copies of the 50 centime Jeanne d'Arc and 1 copy of its contemporary, the 50 centime lined sewer, to pay the 21 franc foreign registered airmail letter rate, second step, to Argentina. It is the largest known multiple use of this stamp. I would now like to close by sharing with you a short video to remind us of the context of this particular stamp. It was filmed during the Fêtes de Jeanne in Orléans in 2023. The girl chosen to represent Joan of Arc each year in the annual Fêtes de Jeanne has to meet certain criteria, including having lived in Orléans for at least 10 years, going to school in the city, being a practicing Roman Catholic, and giving her time to charitable causes. And as you will see, equestrian skills are also an advantage.
Merci mille fois. Merci à tous.
Thank you, Mick.
Right, thank you.
That's really good. Obviously, really impress everyone with that because they haven't got any questions for you.
Perhaps they're too tired after all their gardening.
Perhaps that's what it was. Simon, over to you.
Well, I don't have a question, Mick, but I noticed the booklets, which fascinated me, some of the advertising, that one particular booklet said tissue pour lingerie, which I thought was quite interesting to my little schoolboy French. I think is lingerie fabric, but they're
Yes.
advertising lingerie fabric in a stamp booklet, and I suddenly had a spark thinking that would make a very interesting open exhibit, wouldn't it? Perhaps I have enough things on my plate, but I thought lingerie fabrics in an open exhibit, interesting.
Yeah. That would be interesting. So
Yes.
certainly novel. Yeah.
No, as I said at the start, I loved it when I saw it in rehearsal. Very colourful exhibit, some wonderful material, and I just thank you very much for sharing it with us. If we definitely don't have any questions, can we put it out? Nobody on the chat room, Mark?
That's what I'm seeing. No one's chatting with me, so
Then Mark, could you put up the certificate of appreciation for Mick, please?
I will do indeed.
There you go, Mick.
Thank you very much indeed. I look forward to receiving it.
And thank you very much. I think that sort of ends the formal part of the meeting. Open to people for the general chat if they want.